Cheers. Welcome back to class. How do I sound? How doth I sound? How doth I sound? Aloha nerds and welcome back to the Salawag's Widescreen Gut Reaction, where I watch things and react from the gut. The other night I had the pleasure of watching The Truman Show, starring Jim Carrey as Truman Burbank. He is a man who's grown up his entire life in a fake city known as Sea Haven, and his entire life has been a television show, although he doesn't know it. And throughout the course of the movie, Truman is in his 30s. He has a wife, he has bills, he has a job, but he longs for escaping Sea Haven. He's never left the shores of Sea Haven. In fact, the movie goes so far as to show that Truman has this trauma. He went out boating, fishing with his father as a kid, and unfortunately there was a horrific storm in which the father was lost at sea and Truman was left on the boat. And this was a manufactured trauma. There are many manufactured scenarios to sort of psychologically force Truman to stay in his little town of Sea Haven. But the whole movie is about his struggle to both realize what's going on and to escape. Simply to escape is all he wants. He doesn't know what he's trapped in, but instinctually he knows that he's trapped. And so it's a very good movie. It's one of Jim Carrey's best, one of his best performances. I know a lot of people will look at The Majestic or Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, but I think The Truman Show is his best because of I'm going to discuss a particular scene of which I have some footage, and I'll be showing the footage. Today I'm really just talking about one particular scene, and for one particular reason. I want to talk about the power of directing. So The Truman Show is not unlike The Matrix, in which the main character realizes he's living a false reality. The difference is this false reality is a TV show set, and everyone he knows is cast. They are real people, but they're playing characters. They are saying lines that are being fed to them. Everyone in Truman's life are cast. They are real people, but they are cast by and being fed lines by Ed Harris, who plays Christophe, the brilliant artist who came up with this crazy notion of a reality show with a real person at the center of it. There's a lot of great things to say about this movie. If you have not seen Truman Show, even if you're not a fan of Jim Carrey, if you don't know who I'm talking about, go check it out. Really great show. It's got drama, it's got comedy, but I really do think that the scene I'm going to talk about is one of the reasons I think this is Jim Carrey's best. And also B, I have a filmmaking lesson. The Salawag's Gut Reaction its goal is to be a show for filmmakers by a filmmaker. I'm reviewing movies so that hopefully if you aspire to be a filmmaker, you can watch this and go, oh, this is the way you should be looking at the scene. And I'm going to bring up a little bit of old beef, not really. I recall talking to my directing teacher back at Academy of Art University. My first directing teacher had said that the problem with this movie was that the movie itself lets you know you're in a show. Right from the beginning of the movie, you get this kind of little title sequence with Christophe discussing, although the nature of his world is false, nothing about Truman is fake. And this opening is intercut with Truman waking up, doing his routine, brushing his teeth, doing goofy stuff in the bathroom to entertain himself. And we're also getting these spliced in interviews of the people who play his wife and his best friend, and the wife is like, this is such a wonderful life. What could be better than this? And the best friend is like, it's not fake. It's real. It's real. Yeah, and even the intro sort of oozes fakeness and falsity. But the truth is the truth that Truman is the only real thing about the show. And as we go through the movie, Truman is uncovering the truth. I won't tell you how it ends. For those who haven't seen the movie, I'm not going to tell you how it ends, even though I'm going to talk about a very specific scene. But just to prime us up, that's the whole premise of the movie. So while Truman is going through his life, he's meeting these characters, like these two twin guys who keep shoving him backward into a sign that always changes every single day. A sign featuring some days it's like a realty service, or sometimes it's a chicken restaurant. Every time he goes to work, he runs into two twins that every day he's trying to get them to sign a deal and get some insurance. He's an insurance broker. And every day they're like, we're thinking about it, but we just like to say hi to you. But really their job is to shove him into the sign and make sure that Truman is right next to this very big sign. So that essentially the show is making its money from advertising like real shows, but it has to embed the advertising in some kind of clever way, so as not to tell Truman what's going on, but to let the audience know, hey, go do this, and also we're getting money from this advertisement. So I really, I want to talk about this particular scene. At a certain point in the movie, Truman is certain that there's been too many weird things that have occurred, and he's certain that he's in a false world of some kind. He gets in a fight with his wife. Linney, who plays Truman's wife, she does such a fantastic job of being not the right woman for him, but she's like this 50s put together dream Stepford housewife. And at all times, whenever there's nothing story-wise going on, if she stops and sees Truman, she has to make some reference to an item that can be sold. And it's so bizarre, and it feels like a commercial break. Truman is aware of it feeling like a commercial break. And it's something that is a seed throughout the movie, that up until this point of the movie, the scene I'm about to show, finally Truman has lost it, and he's tried to drive out of town with his wife in the car because he still believes that she's real. And when they finally get stopped by police because they're driving into some kind of hazardous waste, so there's a huge smoke plume going everywhere. They've driven into the woods, but there's smoke everywhere. It seems like there's some kind of hazardous situation going on at the nuclear power plant. And all these random, fire retardant silver guys come up and capture Truman, and the cops bring them both back home. But it's after this moment that Truman catches his wife selling another product right in front of him, and it seems almost out of awkwardness. She's just automatically selling a product, and he's just like, who are you talking to? Who are you talking to? Why are you selling hot coffee to me right now when we're going through this situation? And it erupts into this fight where Linney starts waving a knife at him, and he defends himself, but she says, do something to somebody, to someone, do something. Who's supposed to do something? And in reality, she's talking to the crew. Now, throughout this whole movie, every time something dramatic happens or emotional happens, the movie will cut to audience members watching and going, yeah, they don't ever show the sex scene. They always just pan the camera away and we just see the curtains blow. Or when Truman is remembering losing his father, they show the old people crying. Oh, it's such a sad memory. Oh, you know what I mean? And so this movie is meta beyond meta, because it's letting you know it's meta without commenting on the fact that it's meta. But at the same time, it's also showing you the process by which artists tell stories. this is kind of what I'm kind of trying to get to. I had this discussion with my teacher about how he felt the movie should have left it a secret as to whether or not Truman was in a TV show all the way to the very end of the movie. And I did not agree with that, because I had the DVD, and I knew from watching the commentary that the original vision of the movie was that it was a secret that led all the way to the end of the movie until Truman realized he was in a TV show. But when they had edited the movie that way, it just wasn't connecting. It wasn't working. And so the editor is the one who came up with this notion that the beginning of the movie should be a title sequence of, oh, although the world is fake, Truman is real. It's a wonderful life. Like, this whole introduction that's like a title sequence was initially supposed to be some promotional material for the movie. But it was when they couldn't figure out what was wrong with the movie, the editor came up with that and worked in splicing in the audience reactions as a more natural aspect of the show. And it really, to me, I think that's the right way to go. I think it's wonderful watching the movie and sort of seeing the audience, and the audience is kind of saying things that if you are a regular watcher of TV in the 90s, you're saying, oh yeah, these are the tropes that happen in television. We're so used to this. And yet when the emotional things happen, we're so hooked. And it's that same feeling when you watch your favorite show. There's always these boring episodes that you're like, okay. But then when the best episodes happen, you're so hooked in, and you're so glad you bought the pillow with Truman's face on it. And that's the thing you're hugging when things are going well. So because I know that the filmmakers tried that. They tried to do The Matrix. It did not work. And it was the editor. They say a film is written 3 times. First when you write it, second when you shoot it, and third when you edit it. So that means that the story is always being shaped to the very last second. No matter what you may intend for the movie will have a life of its own, and it's important that the editor has to be the most objective person to see all the footage and objectively say where the footage can go in the way that tells the story best. I think, unfortunately, in the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen editors have been treated like, some kind of lame craftsman, where you see movies are hyper edited now. They're edited down to a nub, and there's really no more character anymore in most blockbuster movies. Even the good movies have some questionable editing where it's like, where were you going with this cut? Do you know your footage? And as someone who, I started out editing my own stuff in high school, my very first editing was in-camera editing, and I did a pretty good job of it back in like 9th grade. I've always had a natural knack as an editor. Putting in one image next to another, that's just something that's the whole goal of it is to create an experience for the people watching it. And you have to have the objective sense to say, when I put this shot next to this shot, the audience will go, oh, and if I put this shot next to this shot, the audience will go, that's the whole thing. As an editor, you have to know what's going to work. But also as a director, as I was taught by my directing teachers, as a director, you should know editing. You should have a good sense of editing, because the way you shoot is going to guide the editor. There is what's called shooting for coverage in film and television, and you'll see it. It's always going to be a wide shot of the 2 people talking, a medium shot that's about this length of 2 people talking, and then a close-up of 2 people talking. And this is very producer friendly. You can edit the scene any which kind of way. Now there's nothing wrong with shooting for coverage. A lot of directors do it, and certainly if you don't know where to go, it's just a professional, easy way to shoot a scene and make sure you get everything you need. Covering yourself, shooting for coverage. But a real director who knows editing, a director doesn't have to be the editor, but has to know editing and know its function. A real director has to have a sense of how the shots are going to lay out. And so this is what brings me to the scene. So like I said, up until this point, Truman has had a fight with his wife. She's thrown a knife at him, and she cried, "Do something." And that's when, at that moment, Noah Emmerich, who plays Truman's best friend Marlon, shows up with some beers. You know, I guess they live in a town so nice you don't lock the doors. So he just opens the door and he's got the beers and he doesn't know what's going on, even though they were clearly yelling and screaming a minute ago. And he comes to talk to Truman. Now, earlier in the movie, there's a scene where Truman had seen a homeless man who looked exactly like his father who died. And at that moment, a bunch of actors rushed in and grabbed the guy and got him off the set, or got him out of Sea Haven. And during this scene, after Marlon interrupts the fight, we go to this unfinished bridge. This unfinished bridge is very symbolic of Truman's adventure. He wants to go further, but there's some kind of godlike barrier preventing him from going where he wants to go. And at this unfinished bridge, which is the typical hangout spot of Truman and Norman, Truman is finally breaking down and saying, I just feel like everyone in my life is fake and they're in on something that has to do with me, and I don't understand why or what it's about. And he's not crying his eyes out, but his eyes are watery. It's very real, it's very honest. And you see Marlon saying these very kind things to him, like, hey, come on, what are you talking about? We grew up together, we copied each other's tests. They even have a line that they say amongst each other, we failed together, we succeeded together. It's like this very nice, kind line. And then the editing cuts to Christophe, who's feeding the lines to Marlon. So nothing Marlon has ever said to Truman has been real. Even in this moment, there's no improv acting. This is Christophe is writing Truman's life and guiding Truman into this place of complacency, trying to keep Truman on the show. And Marlon reveals that I know why you've been so upset for the course of this movie. And he points and reveals, I found him, Truman. I found him for you. And the homeless man returns on this bridge. And we don't quite see him very clearly. There's fog all over the place, but you know his silhouette. And then Truman gets up and sees him, and you see the look on Truman's face. And as Truman approaches, we cut back and forth between Christophe and the crew in the control room, sort of directing the cameras, directing the music, and it's like, okay, use wide cam. And they use this wide angle shot where you see behind Truman, and you still can't fully see the homeless man's face. And then he's like, cut to button cam 3, and then we see this sort of medium shot of Truman as he's coming closer, and the button cam is on the homeless man's clothes, looking at Truman, and you just see Truman's sort of lost face of, I can't believe I'm seeing you again. And then cut to a different angle, and we see them hold each other, and Paul Giamatti, who plays one of Christophe's producer crew guys, says, should I cut to close-up? And Christophe's like, no, wait. And they let the moment play of them hugging each other, and he's like, swell up music. And then the music goes up, and it's beautiful. And then he says, now go in for close-up. And the camera zooms in, kind of slowly, kind of quickly. It's kind of hard to describe, but it zooms in to Truman's face, and this wicked, crazy smile on his face, like he's so glad to see his father again after thinking he was dead for so long. And it's a really powerful, moving moment, and you see the entire crew just cries and claps, and you see the audience watching television live is crying and clapping, and they can't believe, oh, the dad is back, oh my God, Truman's okay again, you know? And it's and I just wanted to point out this scene this is what directing is. And in a literal way, this is what TV directing is, but this is what directing is. Christophe is controlling the length of the shot. He knows where the shot should be. There's no coverage. I mean, every angle is covered, but the way he uses the camera, he's just using the camera angles that tell the story. And so each shot builds up to seeing the dad's face. But first and most importantly, it's all about holding on Truman's suspense of who is he about to see and what's about to be Truman's reaction to all of this. And it's not until we get the hug and we get a pause that the music rises, and then we get the zoom in, and then it truly emotionally hits, because you're watching live Truman's sudden shocking reaction to having his father in his arms again. But that is what directing is. It is about guiding the audience visually and with music and with production design, set design. Literally earlier in this same exact moment, Christoph was like, hey, easy on the fog. Like, there's so much fog they can't even see the dad. So he's like, easy on the fog. We can't see anything. But stuff like that, the director is in charge of all of that. All of that is what creates the audience's reaction. But this is so meta because the film is showing you the director's process, even though it's in a live sense because it's television, because that's way more exciting. If you were to watch the film version of this, where Truman's actually an actor as well, then you would just be seeing, okay, cut shot, resetting up camera, setting up the next angle, setting up the next angle, and that the film real life version of film is much less exciting than the TV version, where it does kind of happen on the go. But nonetheless, this is what the director does. The director shoots the scene with an intended function. Every shot tells the story. This is what we call mise en scène. Everything in the frame tells the story. The wide shot of one man walking to the other man, the medium shot of the confused look and sort of bewilderment of Truman Burbank as he's looking at his father, and then going back to a little bit of a wide as they hold each other and hug each other, and you can see in this next wide shot that it's the same homeless man and that it's his dad. But we hold for that close-up until the maximum emotional moment happens, which is, Truman not fully accepting it, and finally at the last second just being overwhelmed with emotion that he's holding his father. Like, that is what storytelling is because a director, you plan these shots, you plan all of this stuff, but you want to capture something completely natural and real, something that can only come out in the moment. And essentially that's the whole gag behind the Truman Show, is that the director just wants the main character, at the very least, to be a real person and to truly be reacting to what's occurring to him, to get a genuine emotional story to be told. That is the director's job. That every shot, then the order in which the shots appear, should affect the audience. And most very talented directors pick their shots individually, every shot at a time, because they know every single angle. If you have to pick the right angle, the camera has to be in the exact right spot in order for the audience to accept what they're seeing as a professional project, and B, a sort of a sequence of events that they feel they're experiencing. And the director has to do that by he or herself, or they selves. I don't like that. I don't get into the they conversation. But anyway, he, she, or whatever the heck you call yourself, the director has to put themselves in the point of view of the audience, and the point of view of someone who's standing there in the moment. And when you're standing there in the moment, what angle is the best angle for you to witness the emotion of the moment? And it might be the wide shot at first, but then if you walk around and see your friend's face when they're hugging their long lost father, what would that look like? You have to, as a director, be an audience member and also a photographer at the same time, and you have to pick the snapshots in what order. This is what storyboarding is for. Oftentimes when they make a movie, first you have a screenplay, then you have a director who works with, either draws their own storyboards or has a storyboard artist, basically making a bunch of frames like this, and a bunch of little rectangle frames. with little doodles of where the people are supposed to be standing, where they're supposed to be looking, and just based on your own storyboards, you should be feeling the emotion from the imagery. I had a very important class for this early on in my Academy of Art years called Sketching for Communication, or Visuals for Communication. And the whole point of it was we learned dynamic angles in illustration in order to find out the best way to tell a story with just images. In essence, it was teaching us all to be storyboard artists or comic book artists. Because when you look at a comic book, the certain imagery is presented to you, so A, you know what your location is, B, you know what emotionally is going on with the characters. So you'll get, like if it's a comic book of Spider-Man, you get this beautiful landscape view of New York, and Spider-Man is, riding his web. And the very next image is, someone on a rooftop and they're crying and they're about to jump off. And then the next image is Spider-Man seeing that person on the rooftop crying, about to jump off. And then the next image is Spider-Man leaping after them after they jump off. So all of these things, this is visual communication. It's how you communicate to the audience what's going on. In a comic book, you can do it in panels. In a movie, you do it with shots. And sometimes all of your shots are in one shot. You do what's called a oneer, which they talk a lot about in Talkville. Oneers, when you try to get everything in sort of a single moving camera movement. But there's many different ways to affect the audience. And I just thought this was very worth pointing out. For those of you who aspire to be directors, I certainly do, to look at this particular scene. When you watch Truman Show and you get to this scene, look at how the director picks his shots. Because this was also my first directing teacher, Tim Boxall, who this conversation is about should the Truman Show have been more like The Matrix, where we didn't know that he was in a show until the end of the movie. I say no, because I watched the commentary and I actually knew that the filmmakers already tried that. So that's why I'm saying no. Not because I'm trying to be a smart ass or disagree or think that I'm smarter than the teacher. I just already knew the answer to that question, that the filmmakers had tried it and it didn't work. So that's all I need. All I need is to actually know, and I'm fine. But this is why I watch commentaries. Because the truth is, even the fact that he didn't know that just means that he didn't watch the DVD commentary, but whatever. But that's something for you. If you want to be a filmmaker, you should know. And if you are filmmaking, don't listen to some reviewer who is just reacting emotionally. I'm not saying you should listen to me. I'm saying go watch your favorite movie, watch the commentary, and see what the filmmaker was thinking when they did that thing. Because every single, and especially commentaries in the 90s and the 2000s, the filmmakers are incredibly honest because no one cared back then. Now special features are a fluff piece for the studios. They have nothing to do with the movie. But you go back and watch a great movie from anywhere between 1990 to 2010, and for the most part you're going to get a very honest commentary where the filmmaker talks about, and certainly at those times they were still dealing with studios who kind of knew about movies. Now who knows what's going on. But nonetheless, I just wanted you, the aspiring filmmaker who might be watching this, to think about how you choose your shots. And also, on a technical level, how are you shooting your shots? Because if you look at the Truman Show, there are moments where it's beautiful cinematography, and there's moments where the show is truly shot like a daytime soap opera. Like, that's kind of the film language they're using, is daytime soap opera. But whenever we're behind the scenes, we get this very nice cinematic footage. So the film language adjusts. I did this some episodes ago when I was talking about the Last Action Hero film and how they used film language. Film language in movies, especially before the last 5 to 10 years, film language was something that filmmakers excelled at. Nowadays, I'm seeing film language just be abused. Movies look like cheap videos that could have been made by anybody. I'm not liking what I'm seeing in film today. You got to know your film language. Audiences deserve to see movies that are movies. That from the writing point of view, from the storyboarding point of view, from the shooting point of view, and from the editing point of view, all tell one solid story. The flow of Truman worked because the editor knew, like, look, we need to let the cat out of the bag early. It doesn't matter that we know the twist. What matters is how much it takes for the main character to get to the twist. That's the most important thing. Romeo and Juliet, arguably Shakespeare's most famous play, starts off with Shakespeare spoiling the entire play. He says in the opening monologue, in this 2 hours traffic of our stage, we are witnessing the story of an ancient grudge turned to new mutiny, and two star-crossed lovers take their life as a consequence of the hatred between these two families. And then the play starts, the movie starts. And then now that we know what's going to happen at the end, how did we get to the end? That's the most important thing. That's why I don't really agree with even some of my own masters who say things like, well, it's all about the twist at the end. It's all about the surprise at the end. It's not, because Romeo and Juliet still works as a movie. You can start off telling the twist. What matters is, did the storytelling work all the way up to the point where the twist occurs? That's what matters. Everything that happened to the character, did it lead us to that twist? Because by a movie's end, I'm going to spoil it now, Truman finds out that he's in a show, but I'm not going to spoil how. You have to watch the movie to enjoy it. There are a lot of parallels. There are some religious parallels, very subtle. There's a lot of great parallels that you might catch while you watch the movie, that these things are supplemental, I would say, but not the most important thing. The most important thing about this film is that it's done so well. It's meta without verbally saying that it's meta, and yet you get this dual experience of being the maker and the watcher at the same time, because you're in the behind the scenes as it happens. When you're watching Christoph direct the shots, like go to wide shot, we see them walking together. Go to button cam, we see the medium of bewildered, amazed, emotional Jim Carrey. Oh my God, it's my dad. It's my dad. He is real. Oh my God, he's real. And then back to secondary wide, where we see him hug his father, and then back to back wide, where we're gonna zoom into his crying face as he's holding his dad. Oh my God. As a director, you have to construct that on purpose. But for this film to give us the director's point of view, it gives you that dual feeling, like you're participating in the making of a great moment, while at the same time feeling emotional for Truman that he's seeing his dad. But even this is a part of the filmmaking and storytelling technique, because the very next scene is Christoph being interviewed by a news guy asking questions about the making of the show and what's going to happen now that we've had this huge drama with Laura Linney, who plays his wife. And he says everything that's going to happen. Well, she's going to leave the show. This was a bit extreme, but this was always planned. And we're going to have a new love interest enter soon. And it's all so impartial and so unforgivably impartial, considering what Truman is going through as a person. But I just want to go back to the scene one more time. The reason that I do feel that this is Jim Carrey's best movie is because in the scene where he's talking to Marlon and he's saying, I think everyone's in on it, and Marlon says the line that is fed to him, if everyone's in on it, I would have to be in on it too. And Jim Carrey gives him this frightened, horrible look. There's a look in his eyes that I cannot describe in any other way than frightened and horrified. And I feel in that moment that he knows then right in that moment that that is the truth, that his own best friend is in on this too, and that he can't trust anybody. Because this, to me, is a mirror of a scene from Mission Impossible. In the first Mission Impossible, which is still my favorite, I think if you find any of the sequels to be better, I think you just like entertainment. I don't judge you for it. The other movies are more entertaining. But I do feel that the first Mission Impossible is a genuine spy movie where a spy is getting around trying to figure out what happened to his team. Just a sidebar here to explain what's going on in Mission Impossible. For those of you who haven't seen it, in Mission Impossible, starring Tom Cruise, I think it came out 1990 something. In that Mission Impossible, Tom Cruise is the point man in a team. They're trying to capture a guy, but the mission goes wrong and his entire team is killed. And so he spends the entire movie trying to find out who killed his team. And at a certain point, he meets a guy who he thought was a friend earlier in the movie, but during that scene, it's very clear that he knows what's going on. It's very clear that Tom Cruise is aware that this guy, his supposed friend, is the one that betrayed him. And it's shot and written in a way where really these are two spies just sussing each other out. Saying, hey, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? But on the surface, the character who he realizes is the bad guy is saying, oh no, this other guy who we both work with and trust, he's the bad guy. And it's John Voight, and he's laying out all the reasons for why that guy is doing this corrupt thing and killing the team and attempting to kill him and all of this. But Tom Cruise knows. He knows in that scene that John Voight is lying to him. But he still plays it as if he doesn't know. And that's part of the drama of the moment, because we get these subjective edits in that sequence where Tom Cruise is remembering the sequence of events where each of his friends was killed, and he's putting together in his mind how it happened. Now, we don't get, when going back to this scene with Jim Carrey, we don't get any flashbacks of Jim Carrey like, oh, Marlon did this, oh, Marlon must have put the cookie over here so that I would be distracted, We don't get any of that, but just his look is so powerful. He looks so scared at the concept that his friend is actually behind this as well. But I do feel like in repeated watchings of this movie, and even the first time I watched it, that the minute he looked at Marlon with that look, the reason he had that specific look was because he knew. He knew in that moment that even Marlon, everyone he knows, everyone's false. He knew. Because the truth is, part of film language, part of film directing technique, is if you want to stay with the main character gets the tightest close-up, and they get the tightest close-up throughout the entire scene. But the fact of the matter is, after this revelation, we go straight to, oh, I found your father. And now all of a sudden, we're not getting any close-ups of Jim Carrey. And to me, I take that as not just that we're getting this meta scene of Christoph directing the moment of Jim Carrey seeing his long-lost father. Not just that. We're stepping backward and seeing this other point of view because Jim Carrey is aware. And so his performance now is to pretend that he's not aware, because he is now aware of the trap that he's in. That's how I feel when I watch this. I just think, and it might have just been really good editing. It might have just been, that was a great shot, we snagged it for that moment. But I really feel like that shot being there, that's what it's there for, is that Jim Carrey, because throughout this movie, there are little setups where Jim Carrey's he's doing some gardening in a very specific part of his lawn. We don't see it too often. But later on, Now I'm going to spoil some of the end of this movie. So if you haven't seen Truman Show at this point and you're interested, please go watch it. But in the finale of this movie, Jim Carrey can't be found by anybody. People are looking around, they can't see him anywhere. They're like, where did he go? And Marlon gets sent to the house to look for Jim Carrey. He's looking all over the house, and finally goes down to his basement where they also have cameras everywhere. And they're like, how did we lose him? And finally Marlon discovers that Jim Carrey, Truman Burbank, has been digging a hole in his garden for some amount of time. And in essence, I think slowly over time, Jim Carrey has suspected there's cameras and stuff watching him, things like that. And throughout the course of this movie, he's really just isolating, are the 2-3 closest people in my life really real? That is what his internal unspoken mission is are the family and friends that I've known my entire life, are they real too or not? And I think basically, like I said, he found his father as a homeless man, and then the father was yanked off the set because he wasn't supposed to be there. He snuck on set because he missed his son that he raised from childhood to about 10 or 11, whenever the flashback occurs that Truman lost his father. But essentially, Truman kind of knows that all of this is fake, and all he needs to know is whether after his father gets carried away and taken out, he goes to his mom, and his mom is just completely like, oh, I see your father whenever I go to the coffee shop. She's so fake. It's like anyone can see that she's just acting. But his wife and his best friend seem to be the closest to reality that he can experience. And it's in the moment of, if everyone's in on it, Truman, I'm your best friend, I'd have to be in on it too. It's that moment where Truman knows for sure that everyone is in on it and that he has to escape. That he's going to die here unless he escapes. And that is why in the following scene, there's this beautiful thing in the book, A Hero with a Thousand Faces. It talks about how a hero starts in safety or starts in some kind of familiarity, goes on a great adventure into another world he's never been in, and becomes a master of that world. And when he returns, becomes a master of both worlds. And so essentially this loop occurs in Truman Show, where Truman, after getting his father back, goes back to his normal routine as happy Truman, and he does everything the way he's supposed to do the very following day. But it is a ruse, because that night, after breaking up with his wife and his wife leaving him, he just goes into a sullen mode and becomes hard to find, supposedly sleeping behind some boxes he was messing around with. And that's when he goes missing, because Truman has been plotting this escape for a very long time. And there's this beautiful relationship that he has with a woman who is not his wife, where again in flashbacks, Truman has these memories of meeting this beautiful woman in college who is not supposed to talk to him, because in reality she's an extra who's not paid to have lines, and you get paid more if you have lines on a TV show or a movie. If you don't have lines, you get paid bottom rate, $100 maybe. But if you have lines, you get a little bump in your check. So that's the real reason she's not supposed to talk to him. She's not paid to have lines. She's just there to be an extra. But he has this instant connection with her. They both have a chemistry that's inescapable. So in essence, she's showing him how to dodge the cameras and know where they are, even though he's not fully aware of the implications of that. So I just really like how this movie has a lot of great building blocks for how Truman figures out what's going on with him, and how he kind of had a plot throughout the course of the movie that we just are not aware of because he's not showing it to the cameras, of escape. And it's a really beautiful conclusion when we get to the end of the movie and Truman finds out the truth, and What he chooses is beautiful. So anyway, that being said, Truman Show is one of my favorite movies of all time. Absolutely my favorite Jim Carrey movie. Why I like it is that even though in something like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Jim is completely into that character. He feels like such a natural, real person. I like that in Truman Show he gets to be a real person who has these kind of his own manufactured Jim Carreyisms, but when he's away from other people, when he's away from where he feels like he's in the show, he's just this raw guy. He's just this raw person. To me, that makes him a much more full human being than even in Eternal Sunshine, which the only reason he's that dry and that real is because that's what the movie's about. It's about that raw, terrible moment where you miss someone that you love. But in Truman Show, it's about the whole picture of a person, and can you really see the entire picture of a person just because you've watched them on every camera angle possible since they were born? No, they still can hide something from you, and they should have that ability to do that. But at the same time, this is about the faces that people carry. Anyway, that being said, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. Definitely my favorite Jim Carrey film. I really think that if you're a filmmaker, if that's your dream, you should watch this film. Get the DVD, watch all the special features, including the commentary. I understand commentaries you might find boring, but what do I say? Get bored the right way. Learn something. You know what? Learning sometimes is boring, but how else are you going to get good at what you want to do? So wise up, watch the commentary. You don't need to learn from me. I'm just here to tell you where to go to learn better. Go straight to the source. Don't listen to a YouTuber or a reviewer. They're not going to tell you anything that you can't figure out yourself. Go on the film commentaries and listen to what the filmmakers had to say, because you'll learn so much more about filmmaking that way. So, thank you for watching. Remember, don't like, don't subscribe, and don't comment unless you really want to. Aloha. Take it easy.